A Complete Unknown is directed by James Mangold and stars Timothy Chalamet, Ellie Fanning, Edward Norton, among others. And in this story, it deals with Bob Dylan's life as his early days of being into folk music and then eventually going into where he's transitioning into rock music. And along the way, it's also about his encounters that he involves with the women in his life, including Ellie Fanning's character and then also Monica Barbaro's character as well. Now, here's a little backstory. Now, this movie was directed by James Mangold, who I've said countless times he's been one of my favorite directors. He's definitely had a quite variety of different genre of movies, including dramas like Copland, Ford vs. Ferrari, things like that, but also tackling some like blockbuster movies like The Wolverine, Logan, and a couple years ago we had the Indiana Jones film. But the one that comes to mind the most is definitely Walk the Line, which I haven't fully watched, but I've seen parts of it, and for what I have seen, I really enjoy it. And I could definitely see the similarities going into this one on that, with that one being a biopic about Johnny Cash, this one being a biopic about Bob Dylan. Now, I've only listened like just a handful of songs of Bob Dylan myself, so I know, he's definitely led an impact as far as the folk music and everything over a long time, and he certainly is one of the most iconic musicians out there. And the way that he was able to lead across a lot of the different influences, especially for other ones that came along like Neil Young and things like that. He certainly had a great impact in the folk genre, but also in music in general. And he's just definitely he's definitely considered up there as one of the greatest. And so going into this, I just kind of had moderate expectations with it because I still kind of thought it was just going to be like your typical biopic and everything, but also being just a really, insight of what we kind of get to see with it. But from what I've also heard was that in real life, Bob Dylan is kind of one of those type of musicians that kind of keeps things at a more kind of private level, from what I've heard. And I've also heard that he kind of has like a mystery surrounding him. And the funny thing is, with the title of this called A Complete Unknown, it's like that's what they were going for. Because this movie doesn't really show so much as him as a person of who we get to see as, like to know like where he comes from and stuff like that, but also just more of his passion when it comes to write music and getting into a lot of the genre of going from folk to rock and everything, and just the impact that he has from just getting into the music itself. And so after upon seeing the film, I can say that this was definitely a great movie. I definitely up there as probably one of my favorites of the year. It certainly does have a good way of not only having a lot of great stuff that we get involved with Bob Dylan as a person in the film, but also just the way that his impact that he has for the folk community and just music and everything. The way that it plays out was really fantastic. And just even for some of the songs that I'm not really familiar with, I still got into a lot of the ways they play out with it and all that. Especially with how much that you could see the changes as it goes along. When we get into where the period where he was actually turning into more electronic music, which was a big thing that happened in 1965. And so, to get my pros out of the way, the performances in this are all fantastic. Timothy Chalamet, what can I say? He continues to grow as an actor that I've really admired so much with a lot of his films, especially from Dune. Last year with Willy Wonka, or 2023 just Willy Wonka, and the Wonka film that he did, and then on top of some other things that he's done, but here, it was not only was he really had like a very hypnotic performance as Bob Dylan, but just the way that he was able to play guitar and sing and everything, he really carries it on so much to where he's unpredictable in what he does. And the way that the movie plays into the whole like being famous and stuff, it goes into that play where you have a lot of like celebrities or just anyone in general that's famous, and they kind of like to not be around like certain crowds and stuff when they get spotted and everything. And that is a common thing that I've heard with a lot of, just in general with like musicians or celebrities. And so it really tackles into that. And the rest of the cast too are also phenomenal too as well. You got Edward Norton, who I'm glad to see is getting more movies these days, and he plays Pete Singer in this, who's like he wants to basically keep things at the more traditional folk level and keep it with the times, keep everything on that same type of vibe that when he's with Bob Dylan throughout the film. And then you also have Ellie Fanning, who also really knocks out of the park as one of his love interests in the film. That was also inspired by a real life girlfriend that Bob Dylan had as well. That they changed the name of it, but they kept the same kind of characteristics of. But she was great. And then on top of that, you also got Monica Barbero playing Joan Baez. I'm sorry if I can't pronounce her out. Who plays the other musician was well known at that time. And the scenes that involved with her and and Timothy are just so like very captivating. They work really well off each other with their chemistry, and the duets they also play together as well is very catchy and very heartwarming at times too, and it really got to me in a lot of those parts. And then the other biggest scene still the most is definitely Boyd Holbrook, who plays Johnny Cash in this. Now, from what I have seen of Joaquin Phoenix and Walk the Line, he really played it phenomenally. But I got to give a really good hand to Boyd in this because he really captured a lot of what I think of when I think of Johnny Cash, like the energy, the voice and everything. Like he just was so spot on. He's not in it a whole lot, but when he is, he definitely steals a lot of scenes, and so he was great. And then the way that the movie captures the time period of it being the 60s and stuff is very top notch. The production design and the whole stuff where it's evolving with the impact that Dylan's going through, where he's wanting to change focus and stuff into other genres and stuff like that. I thought it was really interesting the way it plays along, especially in the third act. And the music itself is just very top notch. With all the songs that play are just very, it's definitely something to really be seen on the big screen for. When you hear like the classic songs like Rolling Stone, The Times Are Changing, stuff like that, it's really hit me a lot because those are definitely my favorites of his, along with some other ones as well. And that duet that he has called "Girl from the North Country," I thought was really great too. There's more I can go into detail, but this is really one of those kind of films I don't really have much flaws with. The only thing I could say I think could have probably worked a little bit more is that we could have spent more of actually trying to develop more stuff that gets involved, because there's kind of like a time jump that happens throughout the film where you're seeing periods of time kind of pass, and there's like instances where they cut to the next scene and it's like there's not really much like leeway into how we really see the after, like the build up to it and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like for example, there's an instance where the stuff that they actually build up to with both Ellie Fanning and Monica Barbera's characters throughout the film, there are encounters that happen with Bob Dylan throughout. There's a section where it seems like it cuts to another like year later or something, and it almost seems like there was a gap missing that they could have really filled in more with, like to kind of really establish more. But as the movie also goes along too, you start to see a lot of things more unfold. You get a resolution that happens later on in the film that I appreciated, but there is that kind of editing that happens in the middle of the film where it's like, okay, it could have really spent more time on that because it seems like there was some stuff that was missing. Well, on top of that, it does seem like the movie kind of gets itself a little like short-ended. Not really like to where it abruptly ends or anything like that, but it kind of like cuts itself off to a point where we could have seen more of like added on to it toward the third act. When we get toward the end, they could have maybe spent like another like, I don't know, 5-10 more minutes to like really get more of the impact that Bob Dylan had throughout the film. Like the actual things that happen where he's evolving into the actual rock genre, it was almost like they really could have spent more time really seeing the impact that it had, and they kind of left that out to an extent. But that's just kind of more of a minor thing for me because it just really been nice to if they added more to it on that regard. But overall, I still really enjoyed this film, and with that, I'm going to give it a phenomenal grade on the Film Priest meter. So, for those of you who have also seen A Complete Unknown, let me know in the comments what you thought about it, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.